The roar of the Harley had long been silenced. It sat behind the prison gates like a relic from another life, dusty, dented, but still defiant. The man who once rode it, Colt Warner, lay in the prison infirmary, chained to a bed, skin pale as the sheets beneath him. Outside his room stood Officer Sarah Monroe, a woman built from rules, routine, and rigid lines. She was the kind of cop who never missed roll call, never bent protocol, and never believed that criminals could change. Until she met him. It started 3 months earlier, the day she was reassigned to the Texas State Correctional Facility in Huntsville. She had been one of the youngest field officers in her precinct, smart, disciplined, unshakably calm. But her supervisor's corruption report had been leaked, and when she refused to back down, her reward was a transfer. Temporary reassignment to prison oversight. Everyone knew what that meant. A career burial. Her first day behind those walls felt wrong. The air was heavy, not just with heat but with secrets. Men in orange watched her like she was an outsider trespassing in their kingdom. Her boots echoed across concrete floors that had seen more confessions than churches ever would. She told herself she would serve her time, keep her head down, and get out. Then came Colt. He wasn't like the others. No anger in his eyes, no swagger in his step. He was quieter than the wind that swept the yard. His cell was spotless, his tone polite, but there was something in the way he looked at the world, a kind of tired wisdom that only comes from losing everything and still holding on to one small piece of hope. Rumor was, he had once led one of Texas's largest biker clubs, the Iron Vows. People called them outlaws. The press called them criminals. But inside these walls, even the guards said they were something else, men with their own code. Colt never denied his past. He just said, "I rode for what I believed in." For Sarah, that was the same as admitting guilt. It was during her 3rd week when she saw him again, this time not in the yard but the infirmary. He was coughing blood into a paper cup, refusing the oxygen tube a nurse kept trying to fit over his face. She stood by the door, clipboard in hand, pretending not to care. He looked up at her and smiled, faint, weary, but strangely kind. "You the new law?" he asked. She frowned. "You mean officer?" He nodded. "Law. Badge. Rules. Doesn't matter what you call it. You all sound the same." She didn't reply. She wrote, "uncooperative," on the report and walked out. But something about his calm unsettled her. Most inmates feared authority or challenged it. He neither feared nor fought. He seemed done. The next morning, she found a folded note on her desk. No name. Just a line in shaky handwriting. "If you ever want to know why a guilty man keeps smiling, come to the old garage." She should have ignored it. She didn't. That evening, when her shift ended, curiosity dragged her feet toward the unused maintenance garage near the far fence. It smelled of oil, rust, and forgotten time. Inside, under a tarp, sat the Harley. Colt's bike. The same machine from his arrest photos, now covered in dust thick enough to write history on. She stood there, staring at it, until a voice behind her broke the silence. "Still runs," he said. She turned. Colt stood leaning on his cane, a guard escorting him from medical. He looked weaker than she remembered, but his eyes were alive. "How did you get clearance to come here?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Dying men get field trips if they behave." "You're dying?" "Terminal lung failure. Got a few weeks, maybe less. Guess karma rides fast." His humor disarmed her more than his honesty. She wanted to leave. The request came in a whisper that did not sound like a dying man. "Officer Cross, if you ever want the truth, there is a key under my seat. Mile marker 47 before midnight." His breath rattled, but his eyes were steady, and that steadiness was what froze me. The monitors in the infirmary blinked their slow green rhythm. The rain tapped the small window, and the smell of antiseptic made the room feel cleaner than any thought I could form. If I had been anyone else, I might have believed he was delirious. But I am Elena Cross, a by-the-book cop who knows the difference between fantasy and a plan. The difference is precision, and his last words were too precise to ignore. Imagine you are standing between a man and the end of his life, and instead of asking for mercy, he hands you a riddle with a location, a time, and a promise that something buried there will change what you think justice means. That is how it began. Not with romance. Not with rebellion. With a key I had not seen, a mile marker I had never noticed, and a clock already counting down. Weeks before that whisper, I had been sent to the Huntsville complex to assist with compliance. That is what the memo said. What it meant was punishment that does not look like punishment. I had reported a supervisor for pocketing forfeiture cash and using ghost overtime. The report disappeared. My patrol schedule did not. It was replaced with a badge swipe that opened steel doors and a shift list that smelled like a career closing. I told myself I would serve quietly and leave with my record intact. Rules are bones. Bones hold you up when the rest is unsteady. The walls here do not echo. They swallow. You learn the sounds that matter. The cartwheels at dawn, the sing-song keys of old officers who have seen too much, the thunder of a fight before it becomes a report. I walked the tiers in straight lines, logged what I saw, and kept my face still. It was not courage. It was discipline. The men learned my name and stopped trying to use it. That is how survival looks when no one trusts anyone. Then there was him, Wyatt Cole. Not a giant. Not a menace. A lean man with wind lines etched deep around his eyes. The kind of lines you get from decades under open sky and a visor pulled low. They said he used to lead the Lone Star Covenant, a biker brotherhood that newspapers loved to call a gang. His file was loud: racketeering, weapons, accessory to a killing he swore he did not commit. Inside the walls, he was quiet. He swept the chapel floor, stacked library returns, and listened when men lied to themselves. I never saw him beg. Not once. On my third week, a lightning storm rolled over the compound, and the power hiccuped hard enough to make the alarms blink and the radio stutter. In that moment of stutter, a man on the top tier slipped a sharpened toothbrush from his sock and angled toward the laundry corner where the camera coverage is soft. I changed my route 5 steps early. It was enough to make him think again. After count, I found a folded paper in my locker. No salutation, just a sentence in block letters. Corners teach you more than mirrors. I knew the voice of men who try to be clever. This was not clever. It was watchful. The next day, I saw Wyatt push the bookshelf so the corner camera had a clean line again. He did it like a man fixing a bent fence, quiet and practical. I did not thank him. I wrote the maintenance request instead. We both pretended that was sufficient. You learn to read how men carry secrets. Some clutch them tight and sweat. Some spit them out to make a trade. Wyatt carried his like a book he intended to return to the right shelf when the room was empty. He never asked me for anything until the night the chaplain left his bedside with red eyes, and the nurse pushed an oxygen tube toward the face of a man who demanded air on his own terms. Terminal lung failure, the chart said. I believed the chart. What I did not yet believe was the part where he trusted me. Officer Cross, he said later, when the nurse stepped out. I have a last request that is not about me. I heard the trap in that sentence. Every last request is about the speaker. But he kept going, not pleading, just placing facts like landmarks. There is a key under the seat of my bike. Not the ignition. A hollow rivet. It fits a lock you will find at mile marker 47, north frontage, service gate. Before midnight, or it will not open. If you open it, you will know who I was. If you do not, the men who really own this town will keep smiling. I told him that we do not run errands for inmates. He smiled the kindest smile I have ever hated and said, I know. That is why I am asking you. Because you are the only one who will do the wrong thing for the right reason. The wrong thing. The right reason. He said it like a seesaw that could balance if I leaned just enough. I stepped back. Rules are bones. But bones ache when a storm is coming. The Harley sat in a caged bay behind the maintenance garage, covered in dust heavy as regret. I had seen it in evidence photos. Black tank, silver pinstripe, a shallow dent in the right side where a life had turned too fast. I did not plan to touch it. I planned to catalog, to dismiss, to walk away. Instead, I crouched beside the seat and ran a finger along the underside until I felt a rivet that did not quite match. A hollow sound answered a light tap. I used the corner of my badge to pry. The metal cap popped like a held breath. Inside, taped to the seam, was a tiny brass key, no bigger than a thumbnail, with a shape like a cross cut into its head. This is where you tell yourself a story about chain of custody, about how you are only securing property, about how you will write the memo first thing in the morning. This is where you ignore the clock and the way numbers become heavy when someone gives you a deadline. I put the cap back, wiped the smudge, and stood up into the bright white of a security light that buzzed like a warning. I put the key in my pocket and felt how sharp the teeth were through the fabric. Warden Hal Crowder liked to give speeches about order. That evening, He gave one about gratitude, how officers should be grateful for the chance to work where true courage is needed. He shook my hand a second too long and asked about my career goals. I told him the truth I could afford: to finish my shift. His grin did not reach his eyes. In the window behind him, lightning stitched a crooked line across the dark. At 10:42 p.m., a maintenance ping pulled half the night shift to C block for a stuck gate. Radios chattered. The corridor to the rear access went quieter than usual. I walked it like it was any other corridor, the way a person walks into a church to sit and not to pray. The north frontage road was slick with fresh rain. I drove an unmarked unit past the interstate glow until the green 47 floated up in my headlights. There was a narrow strip of gravel and a tired service fence that had a padlocked panel tucked behind scrub. If you were not looking for it, you would call it trash. If you were told it existed, you would see a door. The brass key slid into a lock hidden beneath a flap of rust like a secret under an eyelid. For one breath, I thought of nothing at all. For the next, the lock turned, and time moved again. The panel swung inward, and behind it sat a metal box cabled to the fence post. No labels, no grace, just purpose. The lid clicked open on the second try, and under a layer of plastic lay photographs, receipts, a ledger bound with red thread, and a small toy. A plastic sheriff's star scuffed by a child's pocket. Imagine you are holding proof that the story you believed about a man was written by someone who needed him as a villain. Imagine you are holding a child's trinket among adult crimes, and the plastic star is heavier than every page. I lifted the ledger, and names looked back at me: business owners, a deputy, a judge's aide, a freight company with smiling billboards on the highway. Money flowed in neat columns, routes mapped like veins. On 2 pages, a symbol repeated, a small cross cut into a circle, the same shape as the key. Headlights washed over the mile marker, too sudden and too bright. I dropped to a knee by reflex and closed the lid with my palm still inside it. A truck rolled past without slowing, taillights fading like an idea you do not quite trust. When the road went black again, I took a breath I had been saving for years. Before midnight. He had said before midnight. It was 11:54. I took the ledger and 3 photos. I left the toy star. Not because it did not matter, but because it mattered too much to move without a promise to bring it home. I locked the box, shut the panel, brushed gravel from my knee, and did not look back until I was in the car with the doors closed and the world small enough to hold the choices I had made. Back at the infirmary, Wyatt slept with his mouth slightly open, the kind of slack that children have when they trust morning to arrive. I stood in the doorway and felt the weight of paper in my jacket. He sensed me before he saw me. His eyes opened like a slow dawn, and when they found my face, something unclenched in the lines around his mouth. "You went," he whispered. "I was never here," I said. He smiled, small, real, like a man who did not need victory, only proof. "Then you know why I asked." I did not answer. I did not have words for a world where a ledger could be both a map and a mirror. I only knew the next part would ask for more than a key and a mile marker. The next part would ask for me. The pages smelled of oil and smoke, like they'd been born in a garage instead of a courtroom. Each name was a scar, each signature, a bruise. The ledger wasn't just accounting, it was confession, and my badge suddenly felt heavier than the gun on my hip. By morning, the storm had rinsed the world clean, but nothing inside me felt washed. I hid the papers in my locker under the spare vest I never wore. All day, I replayed the night in my head, the click of the lock, the cold metal box, the plastic star. Every time I blinked, I saw Wyatt's face as he whispered, "You'll know why I asked." The warden called an emergency staff meeting. "A routine inspection," he said, though his smile looked stitched on. He talked about security breaches, missing evidence, and an ongoing internal inquiry. He kept his eyes on me too long, the way a snake tests distance before it strikes. When he said disciplinary review, my stomach turned. Someone knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to make breathing cost extra. After shift, I went to the infirmary. Wyatt was awake, sitting upright, his oxygen tube hissing like a soft threat. He looked at me before I spoke. "You found it." It wasn't a question. It was relief disguised as fact. "You set me up," I said. He shook his head slowly. "I gave you truth. What you do with it decides who you really work for." I wanted to hate him for that sentence. Instead, I asked, "What's in it for you?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing left." Just a promise. He told me about the girl, Lena, 10 years old when she died. Not his blood, but his world. Her mother had overdosed. The club took her in. Then one night, a truck from the warden's own contracting company lost a shipment, containers meant for the prison's medical unit. Only later did Wyatt find out what they were really moving. Narcotics hidden in blood donation crates. The same shipment that killed Lena's mother. When Wyatt tried to report it, the club turned on him, the cops framed him, and the state sealed the evidence. The ledger proves it, he said. But paper doesn't speak unless someone honest reads it out loud. That was his last wish, not revenge, not freedom. Just to let the truth breathe. I walked out numb. Imagine the quiet after thunder, the kind that feels wrong because you're waiting for another strike. That's what it was like inside my skull. The right thing and the legal thing. One would cost me my badge, the other my soul. At 2 a.m., I copied the ledger. By dawn, internal affairs arrived. They questioned every officer, checked every locker, and when they reached mine, I almost forgot how to stand still. The older investigator, Burke, flipped through my files, then smiled without warmth. Good soldier, right? Never makes trouble. He left without touching the vest. Either luck or mercy had just bought me time. That evening, Wyatt's condition worsened. The nurse called me, and even though I was off shift, he was pale, sweat turning his skin to paper. He reached for my hand with surprising strength. "Did you read the last page?" he whispered. I nodded. The last page wasn't numbers. It was a single line. "If they silence me, tell the child of the road her father kept his word." I had no idea who the child of the road was. Maybe a code, maybe a person. But I promised anyway. Because promises are how people like me damn or save ourselves. At 7 p.m., Wyatt Cole took his last breath. No ceremony. No headlines. Just the sound of a monitor flatlining and the nurse whispering a prayer she didn't finish. The next morning, I was suspended, pending investigation into possible misconduct during evidence handling. They called it precautionary. I called it predictable. While packing my locker, I found a note wedged beneath the inner lip of the metal shelf. A scrap torn from a Bible, the verse hand underlined. "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Under it, Wyatt had written, "Freedom's waiting, Officer Cross. Ride careful." I didn't cry, but when I walked past the garage, the wind shifted the tarp. The Harley's chrome winked like it knew me. That night, I drove to Austin. The ledger's copies were sealed in a manila envelope on the passenger seat, the brass key beside it. Every mile marker felt like a countdown. I could almost hear his bike behind me, ghost tires humming in the rain. At mile 47, where it had all begun, I stopped. The fence was gone. Only wildflowers grew there now. I buried the key beneath them, pressed the soil down with my palm, and whispered, "For the child of the road, wherever she rides." Then I mailed the ledger to 3 addresses: a journalist I trusted, a federal agent I didn't, and one copy to the Department of Justice's Public Corruption Unit. Anonymous sender. No return name. Just one sentence on a note inside. "Start with the warden's construction contracts." When I returned home, my badge sat on the kitchen table. It looked different now, smaller, somehow. I placed it in a drawer and closed it slowly. The next morning, the news broke. Texas prison warden under federal investigation. Evidence leaked, whistleblower unknown. They said a dying inmate had left behind proof of systemic corruption. They didn't say his name. They didn't say mine. And that was exactly how it should be. Later that week, I received a brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph. Lena, the little girl Wyatt had mentioned, standing beside a woman at a motorcycle rally from years ago. On the back, one line written in his careful hand. "Thank you for letting her know I kept my promise." I stared at that photo until the colors blurred. Then I whispered the only words that fit. The right thing and the legal thing are not the same. And somewhere, maybe in the place where the horizon swallows the highway, I swear I heard a Harley engine turn over once, then fade into the wind.